I have been working hard to heal intergenerational traumas. That is not to say that my siblings, aka the others, were not doing what they felt was their part in healing the family line in their own way. When my brother, the eldest, met his wife in college, he made sure to do things properly. No shotgun involved. Although he did not come home very often, the family made frequent road trips to the Northeast to visit him and his wife in their life there. He was and still is a typical older brother, dismissive, distant, and busy with his life, then leaning in with charming manipulation and overinflated promises when in need. He was mischievous in his youth, replacing our pillows with shoes when we were sleeping, double daring us to perform duties either for his amusement or personal gain, antagonizing and terrorizing. I vaguely remember being around the age of 7 and having a particularly nasty altercation beginning, or ending, with him in the kitchen with me, stabbing him in the side with a fork, and him trying to shove me into the oven, which happened first. I no longer recall. It is notable because of the very real anger and fear I felt for the first time, raw and complete. Whatever I was responding to resulted in raging, murderous violence and intent that was so completely out of character for me. It is etched in my memory. My brother wore those scars long after, and my guilt and shame has still not faded. There is more than a little tinge of fear in that reminiscence, as well of the dangerous impact of emotional dysregulation. Even now, I am terrified of the devil inside and its full unexplored capabilities. In my middle age, I do not know what demons I may have repressed in those early stages that have lain dormant these many years. That, along with the childhood neglect that revealed itself in my having a ball of pet mercury from one of the house's broken thermometer, and the metallic taste of lead in my mouth for a while. There is really no telling how this particular monster will present itself when she does. For my brother, I feared what I would have done with a loaded weapon at hand. The anger was so acute. I would say that with the fork, though. He had it coming. Since he was the eldest, he was not expected to help raise any of us or take on more responsibility. Being male, he got a pass on all housework, which was still considered distinctly feminine, and would bribe us younger kids to do any of his outside chores with promises of a borrowed comic book or a turn on the news gaming console. Outside of the house, his full focus, like most young lads, was on athletics, friends, and cheerleaders. It was my sister, the second oldest, that was recruited as a mother's helper to dampen the chaos of caretaking. When asked why they had so many children, my parents would routinely say, so that you all could look out for each other, with my older sister holding the brunt of this undertaking. I believe having us all raise and entertain each other, my parents felt that they could continue to procreate. Therefore, there was fairly consistent attunement and good enough parenting of me as a child across all of my caretakers, and made even better by the fact that my mother was constantly present, even if not actually mothering me in that moment. Depending on who was designated to watch me, there would be differing emotional containment capabilities. Everyone was able to provide some degree of care one to another before their own developmental needs called for attention, support, and validation. Therefore, there was consistent but incongruous care. This particular sister took her duty as surrogate mother seriously, but with great resentment, and rightly so. She sacrificed her youth to atone for the sins of the father, and as the oldest female, she had 5 others constantly tugging on the fertile teat of her independence. I looked up to her immensely in my youth, and I still grieve our mutual parting of ways in my young adulthood. I suppose I grew tired of honoring and submitting my will to that of the maternal mentorship that was fostered between her and I. I still feel a great deal of guilt at times for it, considering all that she was willing to offer in the way of guidance. I do not think that I was ungrateful, but I felt the tug of my own path that differed so radically from hers. I was much more dedicated to self-expansion than self-development, and those terms are related in nuance only, and not at all synonymous. I yearned for personal development, touching, and being touched by the lives of others. My sister was focused on professional development and its practical promise of security. The next 2 sisters would agree to disagree. The lack of privacy in our tiny home and closeness of age led to polarizing behaviors. The mirror principle at work, With these two, I tried to be as still as possible so they would understand that the friction fraught frequencies and rocky reverberations between us was their own echo and that I was just a sounding board for their own angst. The contrast between the highs and the lows were always too intense. The exhaustion of knowing how to push each other's buttons, all the while trying not to made for short, terse interactions for the most part. When the three of us ended it up in high school all at once, and you would have thought us strangers, for all we interacted, and for all the interests we held in common. We only convened on the battlefield of sports, putting our differences aside for the greater good of pride and glory, for our school and for our father. The younger two, a boy and a girl, would appreciate me leaving them out altogether. My younger sister has been an adult from a young age, having been taken under the wing of my eldest sister. My brother, with his deep, shy sensitivity and inability to live up to the brawn and charisma of our older brother, now battles with schizophrenia, exacerbated by my mother's constant presence in his life. Having moved into his house and onto his living room couch, her mental illness drowns him and distorts, making the ridiculous seem like reality. But from an outsider's perspective, we probably all seem riddled with varying psychopathies within the medical model of mental illness. But I think we could make a case for any other human on this earth if we are to pick each other apart, only for that diagnosis to fall away again upon further dissection. Everyone possesses an intelligible algorithm given patterning over enough time. Whether or not it can reside harmoniously within society is another question altogether. I would like to think that we can say for each other that we are all doing our best, despite any appearance to the contrary. If we take this approach, however, no one could be condemned, and there would be no need for a savior or many. According to Earth's algorithm, we are overdue. Our summers were crammed with visits with anywhere from 2 to 4 cousins, extended relatives, and countless young neighbors and peers. I remember those days most fondly due to my burgeoning self distinction, apart from the whole, and my ability to sit in solitude and not compete in warring egos and rife. I learned that this saved me, especially in social gatherings in which hectic hormones and kissing cousins challenged the boundaries of appropriate touch. I still do not know if I have any residual blind spots here when it comes to early childhood sexual trauma. I dismiss it as not having been penetrating or intrusive physically, just psychological in that it was intimacy trauma, not necessarily sexual trauma, and continues to be a recurring theme for me. Having permeable emotional boundaries and a disorganized sense of safety, but a very strong sense of self is complicated to navigate in a world of fascist monopolization masquerading as capitalism. In this world, there is money and power to be gained in the permeable emotional boundaries and a disorganized sense of safety. Therein lies the locus of control. It is the strong sense of self that becomes anomalous and anarchistic. I do not know what to do with all this authenticity, but I would imagine that in this modern day matrix, with its mass and amassing mindless drones, a touch of authenticity may be viewed as either madness or genius. I do not find fault nor with, nor will I argue with either moniker.